Welcome to the Sports Spectrum Podcast, where faith and sports collide. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
This is episode number 108 of the Sports Spectrum Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us here on the show today. My name is Jason Romano. As always, you can find us on Apple iTunes, on Google Play, on Stitcher, and recently we just got added to Spotify. So if you're a Spotify subscriber, you can go there and listen to the Sports Spectrum Podcast, all 108 of them right at your fingertips on that app, Spotify. And you can always find everything regarding Sports Spectrum at sportspectrum.com and also at our YouTube channel. Just type in Sports Spectrum and every single podcast is available right there on YouTube. And we thank our partners, Compassion International, for being a part of what Sports Spectrum is doing here with this podcast and our media ministry. Go to compassion.com/Sports Spectrum, and for just $38 per month, you can sponsor a child, give them a hope, and give them a chance for a productive future in Jesus' name by going to compassion.com. Your $38 provides education and tutoring and medical care and food and vocational training and the opportunity to have a deeper relationship with the Savior himself, Jesus Christ. Go to compassion.com/Sports Spectrum. That's the new URL, the new website, and sponsor a child today in Jesus' name. Today's guest is Steve Springer. He is a baseball instructor. He's a former Major League Baseball player, a former minor league baseball player, as well as a former scout with the Toronto Blue Jays. Steve is known as the mental guru in baseball. His mental game approach is something that he has used over the past few years, and it's helped many, many people, including Major League Baseball all-stars, guys like Nolan Arenado and Ben Zobrist and Paul Goldschmidt and Daniel Murphy. These guys are calling Steve Springer when they're in a funk and saying, help me get out of this funk. And Steve is all a part of the mental game and not just, being able to hit a ball and run to first. His is all about the mental approach, and he's got a great thing going on with quality at bats and his company. But Steve has a really great story because this guy played 14 seasons as a minor league baseball player. I mean, to gut it out for 14 seasons, just hoping and praying that dream of getting to the big leagues would come to fruition, that's powerful. And Steve did it 14 years in the minor leagues, and he finally got his shot in 1990 with the Cleveland Indians being called up to the major leagues. However, it didn't last long. He's played 8 total Major League Baseball games in his career. 8. So the man didn't have this illustrious career and this 14-year Major League Baseball career. It was a 14-year minor league baseball career. But on this podcast, we talk about Steve's journey through baseball and how he believes that his minor league journey was actually the plan God had for him to be where he is right now. He almost believes that if he got to the major leagues, he might not be the man of God that he is right now. So it's a really fascinating story. And I love how Steve kind of weaves in the mental game approach and how he goes about being a coach for so many Major League Baseball players, as well as how God brought him through his time in the minor leagues and what the Lord is doing in his life right now. So without further ado, let's get right to it. He is Steve Springer right here on the Sports Spectrum Podcast. Take a listen. Steve, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jace, good to be here, buddy. It's funny to hear ex-Major League Baseball player because even though I got like 2 hits in each league, I consider myself like a minor league player.
I always tell students when I'm working with them, all you have to do is have done it once, and it counts, right? It goes on the resume. So you are a former Major League Baseball player.
No, that 2 hits in each league qualifies me to be the 100th golf celebrity. So I was really happy to get those. So
that's right. We're going to talk about your baseball career in a second. I'm excited because I think even though it was 4 total hits, there's a lot of really great stories and anecdotes just in those four hits that you had and those 2 stints that you had in the major leagues. But let's talk about your current role right now for a minute. Mental game hitting guru. Tell me about why you're so focused on the mental game of baseball and how this sort of evolved into where you are right now.
Oh, wow. I don't even know where to start it. I mean, the mental side for me is a difference maker. I mean, you're talking to a guy that didn't start in high school. I got cut in college, I played in the big leagues, and I got Major League All-Stars calling me now. So, usually when I go speak across the country and I speak to travel ball kids and high school kids, I try to inspire them, not only teach them the mental side, but inspire them that, you're not too small, and get good grades. And, my whole story is, I was 4'11", 90-pound freshman in high school. I got 3 at-bats. When I was a senior, I was 5'8", 140 pounds. I didn't start. I grew 9 inches in high school. I went from tiny to small. I had a sophomore take my job as a senior, so I didn't start. My brother went to Golden West Junior College. He's all state. And I didn't even start, so I'm going to go to Golden West. My brother's there. The coach knows I'm coming there. He didn't even have to call me because he didn't. And I went out for the team, and I got cut, which is baffling how bad this coach thought I sucked. I mean, my brother's all state, and I get cut.
Yeah.
I get a job at Disneyland working on the canoes, and 3 days later, my brother comes home with the uniform because 3 guys quit. And I was 19 years old. I got 3 at-bats the whole year. And, fortunately, I grew 4 inches when I was 20, had a new body, had a full ride to UCLA, greatest 5 days of my life until I looked at my transcripts. I couldn't get in, so that was brutal. I ended up going to University of Utah, and 50 scouts there to see Rick Aguilera, Wally Joyner, and Corey Schneider, and I went 5 for 5 with a bomb, 2 doubles, and 5 RBIs.
Wow!
And I got drafted by the New York Mets with Dwight Gooden, and I was in Billy Bean's wedding, me and Lenny Dykstra, all these guys in the 80s, and I ended up playing 11 years in AAA, and I like I said, I feel blessed to say I got 2 hits in each league after that little story. And when I go speak, I'm just trying to inspire kids, and the mental side is everything. I had a guy named Tommy McCraw who changed my life, and every time this guy was around, I was a stud. But he was a roving hitting coach, and so I'd see him about 3 days a month. But every time he was around, I was a stud. I was good. And, as dumb as I was smart enough to realize that. So I asked him to, if I come up to his room and I brought a tape recorder, I said, look, can you talk to me about me and what you think I need to do to play in the big leagues? And we talked for like 20 minutes, and it was all about me and what he thought. And if I was in my car, Jason, I was listening to that CD. And it changed my life, and talking about the mental side and talking about competing. And that gave me the idea, 30 years later or 20 years later to making my own CD. And it's just amazing. It's as hot now as it's ever been. I made it in 2001 talking about the mental side of hitting. And too many players let their mind get in the way of their ability instead of help their ability. And in baseball, I could do everything right. And baseball says I suck. I mean, I hit 3 balls right in the screws right at somebody. My batting average goes down. I feel like I failed. And all of a sudden, the wrong guy starts playing, because one of my lines is we all got 2 players in us. I got confident A.J. Pollock, who's an absolute star, and I got non-confident A.J. Pollock, who's not very good. Right. Well, you know what? That guy doesn't play anymore, and so I'm helping all these guys try to figure out how do we get the right guy playing. And there's so many mental minefields in baseball,
Why is mastering the mental game so vital for this sport of baseball and even softball, but mostly for baseball and what you work with?
Well, if you like your abilities and your abilities aren't showing up, it's not your abilities problem. It's what you're thinking. It's like what you think you feel. And all of a sudden I'm playing with the wrong person. And I just know my whole spiel is if you could play in I don't care mode, because sometimes we care too much. And you play every single day like it's opening day, because nobody in the history of baseball has ever walked up the plate on opening day with no confidence ever, because there's no yesterday yet. Right. And too many of these kids are playing with tension, anxiety, and pressure instead of calmness, toughness, and focus, having some fun. And it's one of my lines when I speak. If you want to play with tension, anxiety, and pressure, go join the military, because that's where that's at. I mean,
Absolutely.
We're playing baseball and softball, and it's not a 3-hour timeout. Nobody's in trouble. But because of expectations and parents wanting scholarships for their kids, and parents, I promise you, if your 10-year-old goes 0 for 3, the top colleges in the country aren't panicking right now, but we think that, it's all about me and getting hits. And, I'm into, having good at-bats and getting the right guy playing. Yeah. And, it's like I said, too many players let their mind get in the way of their ability instead of help their ability.
Well, you said it too, because we're such a stat-driven league or stat-driven society in many ways of accomplishment. And if you go 0 for 3, man, I just look, and I remember being a kid, that was the first thing I would go to was the sports page and see how I was a Mets fan, see how Darryl Strawberry did. Oh, he went 0 for 3, had a bad night. and I didn't watch the game, and I may not have seen that he was robbed of a home run and hit 2 line drives right at people. And you're there in that sense, teaching these guys, it's okay to go 0 for 3 if you're hitting the ball right and your mind is right, not to focus on that, right?
Well, stats are evil. Stats make you feel a certain way. And in baseball, you go back to that one statement: I can do everything right, hit 3 balls right in the screws right at somebody, and baseball says I suck.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
Yeah.
And so when we change what we think success is, right? I tell these guys, try to line out 5 times a day, right? Good hitters line out more, right? That's the whole thing. I mean, if you're not lining out 1 time a game, you're not that good a hitter. It's 9 against 1, and we think we should get a hit every at bat.
Right. Yeah.
If I'm a pitcher, I'm mad when you get a hit with those odds,
That's right.
And so it's just changing what you think success is and having fun and getting the right guy playing. And when you do that, and there's so much freedom, the batting average is by far the biggest trap in baseball. It's a trap, man. And when you say, I don't care what I hit, that's when your career starts. When you can play every day like it's opening day and I don't give a crap about me, that's when it starts. And now your abilities come out, and it doesn't mean you get 3 hits every game, and it doesn't mean you win every game. It means you get the right guy playing.
We're talking to Steve Springer here, baseball instructor and former professional baseball player, would say, longtime minor leaguer here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. You work with some of the best in the game. You mentioned Major League Baseball All-Stars, and there's endorsements on your website from guys like Daniel Murphy and Nolan Arenado and Zobrist, Ben Zobrist and Paul Goldschmidt, guys like that. Those are big-time guys. How did working with guys of this caliber come about for you? I know it's a stretch through, just connections and things like that, but how does it come to where you are now and these guys are calling you for advice? Where does that start to take shape and really be like, okay, I guess I got something to offer here, and these guys are liking it and it's working. How does that take shape?
Well, I think that when I made that CD and I started selling the CD at qualityatbats.com, and my Ben Zobrist story is just one of my favorite stories. I was at PAO where I met you, Professional Athlete Outreach.
Yes.
And I'm in a 7-man group. I don't know anybody. And we're at 10 o'clock at night. You had to introduce yourself. And at the time I was working for the Toronto Blue Jays as their mental coach. And so I said, my name's Steve Springer. I'm the mental coach with the Blue Jays. And I see this young kid just smiling, 20-year-old kid. And I said, you got my CD, don't you, buddy? He's like, I can't believe you're here, man. His name is Jonathan Gilmore. And he's like, I cannot wait till I tell my brother-in-law here, he's going to flip that you're here. And I said, who's your brother-in-law? And he said, Ben Zobrist. So I meet Ben that night at 11 o'clock at night. He couldn't believe I was there. He gives me a hug. He said, dude, you changed the way I think. I got your CD when I was 25 years old in AA, beating myself up, worrying about my stats, worrying about my batting average, non-confident Ben showing up. And I heard your CD, dude, and the light bulb went off. And 2 years later, he was a Major League All-Star. Wow. It was so funny because he's such a great person, not let alone a great player. And this is like 11 o'clock at night. We're talking for like 30 minutes about hitting, and we're there for God. And I see him the next morning. I gave him my new CD right there. I updated it to Quality or Q2. And I see him the next morning. I apologize. I say, hey, man, I didn't mean to wear you guys out last night talking baseball. We're here for God. And he looks at me and he's like, dude, we went up to our room at midnight and listened to your new CD. We almost called you.
That's great. But that shows the influence that you're having, right? And you can see that through these guys and how they're being affected. That's got to feel pretty good.
Well, you know what? Daniel Murphy, the last PAO I was at, he was our leader. And he told me he listened to my CD over 800 times from the time he was in high school through college. And yeah, I mean, see, what happens, Jason, is we give ourselves too much credit to remember what we're taught. Yeah. I could give your audience my whole spiel. Right. And if they didn't have the CD or talking, in 2 weeks, they retain like 20%. That's what we do as humans. So, the best thing I could advise, if you make somebody good, I don't care if it's in business, sales, whatever, get something on audio that person could listen to when you're not there. And that's what I did with Tommy McCraw. And that's why, when I was with the Blue Jays, I made an individual 10-minute CD on these guys' iPhones for me talking about them, personalize them, because I don't live with them. I'm not there all the time. I roved. Right. And so now they could listen to it. I love that line that we give ourselves too much credit to remember what we're taught. And so all of a sudden you start, listening to things like that tape with Tommy McCraw. If I was in my car for 7 years, it was on. And my wife's like, really? We got to listen to this crap again? I'm like, sorry, honey.
No.
She's like, wow, nice memory.
Yeah,
but exactly. It made me good.
Yep.
Well, Nolan Arenado, I played junior football with his dad when I was 8. And so I've known Nolan forever. And he's Christian, he's a brother, and he's a perfectionist.
Mm.
And I try to tell him, I said, bro, it's okay not to be perfect. There's one perfect, Jesus, that's it.
Yeah.
Right. Just be good and get the right Nolan playing, because even non-confident Nolan's not any good. He doesn't play anymore. And his quote on my website is, when I get into a funk, Spring knows he's getting a call. And, so it's awesome. I mean, think
Yeah.
about it. We got Paul Goldschmidt will call me, and I'm just like, wow.
Yeah. Well, baseball is such a game like that too, where, early in the season's still early as we're taping this interview in early May, but guys will start off and they're hitting 220, and it's just like, oh, what's he? And they're in a funk, or they're in a slump. What's a slump in baseball? 2 for 20 or 4 for 40 slump. And then they just get it and they go on a tear. And when you look at it at the end of the season, especially with these all-stars, it evens out to these really good numbers. But the season is usually not just a consistent, 320 and, a certain amount of homers each month. It's really a lot of ups and downs, right?
Well, no doubt. Well, it just depends. I mean, in my mind, I don't agree with the word slump. A slump is for somebody that cares about the batting average.
Right.
I call it a funk.
Right.
Right. I was talking to Randall Grichuk the other day with the Blue Jays. He's off to a brutal start. He's like 5 for 60. I said, bro, if you go 3 for 4, the media still thinks you suck because you're hitting still under 200, and they don't want to get you out of that little trap. And this is why, when you could play every single day like it's opening day, and sometimes, a lot of hitters know this. Sometimes you're so bad you go into I don't care anymore mode, and then you start hitting, and then always start hitting, and you start caring again. It's like a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And until there's a hard hit contact title, like I nailed more balls than anybody in baseball, lining out's going to suck.
Yeah.
Right. If they have a hard hit contact title and then you line out and somebody says, way to swing it, you'll say thank you. But until that, it's like, yeah, right, buddy.
Right. And they should keep stats. I'm sure they are. Advanced analytics has it, of just how many balls hard that you hit. That way you can be judged by that and not by batting averages, for sure.
See, I'm trying to help them get their highest batting average, by the way. Right. There's not a confident batting average stat and a non-confident batting average stat. It's one stat. It has no brain. It doesn't know who's showing up. So I'm trying to help you get your highest batting average by getting the right guy playing and trying to line out 5 times, because it just puts you in a really aggressive mindset.
You mentioned PAO a few times. That's Professional Athletes Outreach. They're the parent company that owns Sport Spectrum and the conferences that you and I have met at. So it's obvious that your faith is important to you. Let's talk about when that became really important to you, when you made Christ your Savior. Let's go back to that moment. Was it when you were a child, or was it more of in adolescence or in adulthood? Talk to us about your faith.
Well, baseball has been such a big part of my life. Like when I was, growing up, no church. My parents might throw us on a bus on Easter and Christmas with the kids, and really not a lot of faith. I wasn't saved, and I ended up getting drafted by the Mets, and I ended up I met a guy named Mickey Weston, who's, Hall of Fame God guy, second guy that I met in pro baseball. And he kept asking me to go to baseball chapel. And I said, yeah, I'm good, buddy. And one day I just went, and it just made sense to me that, I knew I was a sinner, and I knew I needed a savior, and it made sense. And I accepted Christ. And, it's, when I go speak across the country now, I pray before I speak, no matter where I'm at. I give my testimony. It's not like I'm Billy Graham or anything, but, I let them know God's really loves us. And for a long time, I had him as a cop behind a billboard with a radar gun waiting to trap me. And that's not who he is, man. He's love, he's grace, he's mercy, and he's even more grace. And, and we all got our demons. See, I think as Christians, especially men, I went to a men's ministry Bible study this morning with Pete McKenzie called influencerswest.org. If you're looking for a great message. And he played pro baseball back in the 60s and went to Auburn. And, men just beat themselves up. And I'm the classic case. I think about my sin more than my Savior. And you got to stop doing that, man. If I could live every single day like it's opening day with Jesus, I'll have a better walk, because it's just like, I always talk about having 2 players. And as I got confident, Steve Springer, good player, non-confident Springer, not good. Well, I got flesh Steve Springer, who's absolutely evil, and I got the spirit Steve Springer. So if I'm going to walk in the spirit, it's just there's just so much more peace,
Yeah.
you know.
Are you able to transfer that into your job, as a mental coach and just in interacting with people and being a believer and kind of, so many people I know who I talk to struggle with sort of intersecting their faith into what they do for a living as a job. Are you able to kind of weave those together in some ways?
Well, the one thing that I miss about being with an organization is every time I was in, whether it's A ball, double or triple A, because I rode, there's baseball chapel every Sunday.
Yeah.
And you'd be amazed on some of these kids, man. I call them kids, they're men, their faith. And, Anthony Alford, Jonathan Davis, a kid named Seth Connor with the Blue Jays, who's out of the game now. But I mean, I got Anthony Alford and JD Davis. They're both with the Blue Jays right now. I mean, these guys pray for me during the national anthem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I'll be roving and they'll be out out on the field, play the anthem, and they'll come in the dugout. And I'm like, you get me? And they go, yeah, I got you, Spring. So the relationships that you make, and then hopefully you can talk to a kid that, doesn't know Jesus, while you're doing that. And hopefully you could have an influence on them and plant a seed. We all know it's not our job to save them, but we could plant some seeds, man.
We'll get back to our conversation with Steve Springer in just a moment, but I want to tell you guys about Compassion International. So grateful to have them partnering with us at Sports Spectrum and on this podcast. They do such a wonderful job. I mean, you're talking about caring Christian adults in the local church, knowing every single child by name that is sponsored through Compassion. We're talking about every single child being discipled in the Word of God. We're talking about 150,000 children choosing to follow Christ in the past year alone because of Compassion International. So go to compassion.com/sports spectrum. And that sports spectrum part is cool because we can keep track on all the people that are sponsoring children through this podcast. And Dawn, my wife, and myself, and my daughter Sarah, we sponsor a 13-year-old boy from Haiti. And that $38, man, we don't even look at it. We don't even blink when it comes time to pay for that each month because we know that this money is going to help our young boy that we're sponsoring in Haiti with education and tutoring and medical care, and most importantly, discipling him in the Word of God. It's really an amazing ministry, and to have them being a part of what we're doing here at Sports Spectrum has been a real blessing. So thank you to Compassion International for sponsoring this podcast. Go to compassion.com/sports spectrum, $38 a month, and sponsor a child today. Now back to the Sports Spectrum podcast and our conversation with Steve Springer. We're talking to Steve Springer here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Steve, you talked earlier, you kind of went through your career a little bit, and I want to kind of go deeper into it, I think. Let's go back to the time you were drafted. It's 1982, the New York Mets call, the 20th round. Tell me about that moment, what you remember about that time.
Well, the unique, funny thing about it is my brother played pro baseball for 6 years, and he was at Oklahoma, and he was a senior. I was a junior at Utah, and one of his buddy calls up and he says, "Dude, I heard your name. I think you got drafted." So we called the scout that we knew, and at the time I'm on the other end of the house phone. He's on that. We're all happy. And he said, "Hey, Mr. Cole, this is Gary Springer, man. I heard I got drafted. Do you have a list or anything?" He's like, "Yeah, I got the list right here." And he's like, New York Mets from Utah, Steve Springer. And it was me and not my brother. And so it was like, well, I get the scouts to come over, and my dad's got no filter. It's like thought mouth out. And my brother was like, I wrote a book called Springtime, and he's called Gary the Great in there because he was really a good player. And my dad comes, the 3 New York Mets scouts come to sign me, and my dad's like, "You're signing the wrong guy." And I'm like, "Thanks, Dad."
That's awesome. Always good to have dad's support, right?
Yeah. And then I'm like, "Really?" Anyways, I go out there, and my first game, I hit a grand slam, my first at bat. I called home, and my brother had got picked up by the Tigers that night. So that was a really good day in the Springer household. And my brother played 6 years, and now he's real successful working for Edward Jones, playing softball.
That's awesome. Now tell me about going to the Mets, what life was like, obviously in 1982, you have dreams of making it to the majors and getting there and kind of going through the system. So tell me about that and kind of walking through that system with the Mets and how your journey in professional baseball started to take shape.
Well, the crazy thing about it is I got drafted as an outfielder. I was an infielder my whole life. I hurt my arm at Utah, DH the whole year. The coach put me in the outfield for that one game. I went 5 for 5. Scout never heard of me. He thought I was an outfielder. So I get drafted as an outfielder. I hit like 246 with 11 home runs my first summer. And I go to my first spring training. I barely made the low A ball team as the 5th outfielder. And about May 1st, I got like 30 at bats in April. And like May 1st, our second baseman got traded. And I told the coach, John Tamargo, I said, "Hey, man, I'm an infielder. Could I play second base?" And he paused and looked at me and he's like, "Well, thank God, because you suck in the outfield." And I'm like, "All right, yeah." So he lets me play second base and everything's going great. 8th inning ground ball double play right between my legs. So that wasn't very good.
No. So
I didn't play there for about a week. A week goes by and he lets me play there again. And everything's going real good. 8th inning ground ball double play right between my legs again. But I got 4 hits that day. And we all know if you want to play, you got to hit. I end up playing every single day the rest of the year. I end up leading the league in hits. So now I'm sort of a prospect. I go to instructional league. And then, the next year I'm working out with high A ball and my farm director said, "Spring, how you doing?" I'm like, I'm doing good, but I don't mean to be an idiot, but I feel I should be in double A. I just led a league in A ball on hits. And he looked at me, paused and walked away. Didn't say a word. And I'm like, "Well, that went great." The next day it did go great because he thought about it. I was in double A. My double A team, we had like 18 guys playing the big leaguers. And
is that Jackson? Jackson, Missouri? Is that
Jackson, Mississippi.
Mississippi, that's right.
Yeah, and I was rooming with Billy Bean and Moneyball guy and the president of the Oakland A's, great talent. So we win it all. Next year I go to AAA, and I spent 11 years in AAA, and I'm like, "You really got 11 years, huh?" And now when I look back at it, he put me in those years for AAA for 11 years to do what I'm doing now. Right. And because whether I'm talking to an all-star, the dad of a 10-year-old, my message is the same. This is about being a better competitor than you are a player. It's about, we're all going to compete because we have to, but who's actually competing? Am I competing with confidence, or am I just competing because I'm in the game? And my whole thing is we need to compete with confidence. Anybody that buys my CD, DVD, I send them a wristband that says opening day every day and compete with confidence. And if you could get that guy playing every day, how do we get that guy playing when I'm playing a game where I can do everything right and baseball says I suck? See, that's the whole, this is why pitchers have a chance, because most hitters are walking up there worried about what their batting average is, worried about what they're hitting, and then I started hunting speeds and, too many hitters try and hit the fastball, curveball, slide up, change up, and, is it easier to hit one pitch when you know it's coming or 3 and you don't? So why am I trying to hit 94 and 79 at the same time? Right. Clint Hurdle is one of my mentors, and he said it as good as you could say it on MLB radio a couple of years ago. I was listening, and he's like, "It's really, really hard to hit 94 and 79 at the same time." Yeah. I don't care who you are. So why do I have to until I get 2 strikes? So my whole thing is you don't have to have 5 at-bats a game. You got 27 minimum. It's watching the pitcher, it's seeing what he's throwing. If I told you here comes a fastball 100% and you can't put a good swing on it, then go play soccer, right? But sometimes it's okay to sit, off speed and we could all hit the breaking ball machine in the cage and then it turns invisible during the game. Well, it's because we know it's coming in the cage. And so, I got off on a little tangent on going back to the hitting, but I'm like a walking CD, Jason. It's like all I think about.
And I love that because I can sense the passion that you have in what you're trying to do and try to impact people. And that's encouraging and that's inspiring for me just to listen, because I think we all, when we strip down all of ourselves as people, we just want to help others, and we want to, do the Lord's will. And do it with, confidence, do it with courage, and do it with, this energy. And I think you bring all that. So, but I want to talk about, because I think your story is in the mold of Rudy and Rocky, to be quite honest with you, in many ways. And especially probably more Rudy, because he got his one shot, right, when he went to Notre Dame. So you're 29 years old, and it's 1990. and now you're in the Indians organization, and you get that phone call to go to the big leagues. I want to hear this story, because I think that's got to be the moment that you never forget, that opportunity.
You know what? It was crazy. It was, after spending that long, I remember John Hart came in a couple weeks before that, and I said, "Hey man, am I gonna have a shot this year?" And he was like, "Just keep doing what you're doing, buddy." And then I get, the crazy thing about it is I played for a guy named Bobby Molinaro, who a little bit wacky, right? And I'm playing in a game, and I hit a home run during the game, and I'm up with the bases loaded, ninth inning, down by a run, and I chase two sliders, right? I'm 0-2. He calls timeout and pinch hits for me after I hit a home run in the game. And so obviously that's not my finest moment,
Right.
and I'm mad and probably didn't do the right thing in the dugout, whatever. And the next day they call him in the office, and he looks at me. He's like, pretty mad at me for pinch hitting. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, it wasn't my finest moment, but he's like, well, that's all right. Johnny Goro has something to say to you. And he says, buddy, you're going to the big leagues.
Wow.
We need an infielder up there. And I went numb like I'm doing right now. I said a prayer. I thanked Jesus so much. And then I called my wife and kids, and I didn't have any kids, my wife and brothers and everything and sisters. And it was awesome, man. After spending that much time with people telling me you're too small, you're only here because you're brother. I agree with you, bud. I believe that my story is the baseball version of Rudy. And I even have a movie script right now. We got in a couple people's hands, and the people that wrote God's Not Dead, and
yeah,
I could only imagine they have it. It's not really a Christian script right now, but hey, I could throw a Christian twist in this thing. And, I got saved through baseball. I guarantee you my great grandma was praying for me my whole life, who was a Christian, and so I'm hoping that comes to, but it was awesome, and then the next year I re-signed, or I go to the Mariners, and now I'm getting up there in a little bit of age, and I remember, man, I got on my knees and asked God for guidance. I was thinking about retiring. It was like in May, and
this is 1991, right?
With the Mariners in Calgary, I'm hitting like 220 with 2 home runs. We're in May, not even playing every day, and I get on my knees, ask Jesus, what do I do, man? Give me some advice. I end up calling Billy Bean, who is with the Oakland now as a farm director. He's like, dude, just play this year out. If you need a job next year, you want to start coaching, we'll be able to do something. So that was advice. And so the next day, I hit 2 home runs. The next day, I hit a home run. The next day I hit 2 home runs. The next day I hit a home run, and the next day I hit a home run. So now I'm leading the league in home runs, and so I'm thinking, all right, God, thank you for the guidance. Okay, I'm going to play.
Yeah, but 1991, you lead the league in home runs or whatever it is, and you don't get a shot to the majors that year, right?
No, I didn't lead it. I had a good year. I had like 17 home runs, and the whole career. In 1989, I was MVP of my team with the White Sox. And we won it all, and I didn't get a call up. They called up some guy named Robin Ventura from AA.
I've heard of him. Yeah, he was pretty good.
Yeah, exactly.
Man, so does that frustrate you, like through these years of having what you think is legitimately really good, if not MVP type seasons in AAA, and still not? I mean, you got your chance with the Indians in 1990, but you only played 4 games. And you were right back down. So how was that for you as far as frustration, especially even being a Christian and being, a man of faith? Like, you're frustrated, I got to imagine, at this point, right?
Well, I think it's a good thing I was a man of faith, or I probably would have went off the deep end. I mean, I re-signed with the Mets. I never got to the big leagues with the Mets until I re-signed with them in 1992. And I hit like 290 with 16 home runs. Ron Washington was the hitting coach. He's one of my favorite coaches. Clint was the manager. And on like August 15th, they called me in the office. They said, all right, buddy, you're going to the big leagues. So I got my second call up, and I sit for a couple days. I get a couple pinch hits, and then we went on the road to the West Coast. We're playing the Giants, and I didn't start. We're walking to right field where the clubhouse was, and I was next to Torborg, and Trevor Wilson was pitching the next day. And I just told Torborg, hey, just for the record, I took this guy deep in AAA, trying to put something to get me to start. Well, I ended up starting, and I go 2 for 3 with a double. And I get sent down before I could put my hat in my locker. They said, I'm thinking I'm there through September. They said, spring, we need a pitch. We'll probably call you up in 5 days in September. I'm like, okay, great. Well, 2 days later, they traded David Cohn to Toronto for Ryan Thompson and some stiff named Jeff Kent, the
I
Hall of
remember
Famer.
that trade. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So he took my parking spot. I don't get called up, and that was brutal. So the next year, I re-signed with the Mets in '93, and I go to Clinton like, man, I'm like, when am I going to get one of those? You got to be kidding me call-ups.
Hmm.
He's like, what are you talking about? I said, where everybody looks at the paper and they say, you got to be kidding me. I'm better than Springer, right? And 2 days later, he calls me in his office. He goes, you got to be kidding me. I said, I'm going up. He's like, yeah, you're going to Montreal. So I high five everybody. I'm just about ready to leave the clubhouse. And Clint calls me back in. Hundley hits a 3-run bomb in the ninth. They play 4 more innings, use 4 more pitchers. Now they don't want to get caught short on pitching, so they bang it. I don't get called up. Yeah, thank God I was walking pretty good with God right there, man, because that was brutal.
There's got to be moments like that too, throughout your career where you're like, if it just went one way versus the other, or maybe not with your career, but seeing other people's career and thinking it's all God's timing, right? It's about breaks and opportunities, and you could have easily been somebody else, but God had you being Steve Springer right where you are. There's got to be more moments like that, right? Because that's just kind of how baseball is.
I'm almost thinking, Jace, that he was protecting me from myself. I had
What do you
so
mean
much
by that?
flesh. Well, I had so much flesh in me still, even though I was saved. And, all of a sudden you get up there and you see people changing and they get money. You know what? I probably wouldn't have been the best with all that
Hmm.
at the time. So I got no complaints, man. Like I said, I feel blessed to say that I played, 14 years, got 2 hits in each league. I mean, in my mind, you can't tell me I couldn't have been a big leaguer the last 5 years of my career, especially nowadays when they're platooning and, I felt like I was cheating hitting left-handed pitching.
Right. How many
You know,
times in your career, besides that 91 season, especially later in your career, were you just kind of done, where you were like, man, I just need to finish this? Because you played all the way through 95. You ended up, I was looking at it, you had 1,591 games for 6 different organizations and slugged 128 homers in the minors. That's a long time. Was there other moments there where you were just kind of done? You're like,
well,
man, this isn't going to work.
this is when I really knew I was done. When I wasn't in the lineup and I wasn't mad. you know,
Yeah,
it,
you stopped caring.
yeah. Well, it was just like my body was starting to hurt, and I knew it was time to retire. When my favorite day in baseball was playing golf in the morning and getting rained out at night. So I was just like, you know what? And then I went into scouting. Louis Medina, Christian guy with Kansas City. Now he's like a special assistant to Dayton Moore, and I played with him in '90, and he got a job with the Diamondbacks scouting in Arizona, and he knew Don Mitchell, who's a scouting director, and they were looking for a Orange County, San Diego guy, and I was going to re-sign with the Tigers, and he goes, Louis calls me up and he's like, dude, your playing career is killing your scouting career. And that sort of made sense. And I ended up getting an interview, and I was a scout 3 days later, and I did that with it for 5 years. I was a national cross-checker, West Coast cross-checker for 3. And then I became an agent and did that for 7 years. Don't ask me why I did that. I was chasing the buck. And then that fell apart. I ended up going back with the Diamondbacks as a national cross-checker. And then
Describe. Let me interrupt you real quick. What is a national cross-checker for the person listening that might not know what that means?
Well, everybody has a scouting system with probably about 30 to 40 scouts, and I was on the amateur side, so I had Southern California in Orange County, and then I had a boss that was the West Coast, so he would come in and see it. See, an area scout will scout like in a pond. The West Coast guy and the Midwest and the East, they scout in the lake, and a national guy scouts in the ocean. They see it all.
Okay.
And so just because an area scout likes somebody, it's a big country out there.
Yes.
And so you got guys that come and see them. And I did that. I was a national guy in '08, and I met Tony LaCava with the Blue Jays when I was an agent. And when I needed a job, he wanted to hire me, but he couldn't. But fortunately, I got a job with the Diamondbacks. And then he came after me in '09. He said, Spring, I got it. 2-year deal, American League West. So I scouted pro ball. And then because of my CD, the next year they brought me into the player development side with Alex Anthopoulos, who was awesome to work for. I did that for 8 years, and it's been awesome, man. I mean, I made a career out of baseball, and the story's right. It's, you don't start in high school, you get cut in college, you play in the big leagues, and now you got Major League All-Stars calling you. And I'm speaking all over the country on the mental side of hitting, and trying to be a good witness for God, and share my faith when I speak.
Do you regret anything over your career? Is there anything that you could change? If you could change anything and go back, would you change it?
Ooh, I don't think so, man. I mean, I thought I had a great career. I had a great life. I got saved through Baseball Chapel. The PAO is awesome. If anybody that's playing pro baseball out there, and you've heard of it, go to it.
Yeah.
They got so many, minor leaguers don't even have to pay, and it'll be the best 3-4 days of your year. I guarantee it.
Let's finish up with this, Steve. I know you had, you talk about your faith. Let me just ask you from a just point blank, blunt perspective, who Christ is to you. What does Jesus mean to you? Who is he?
Who he is and who he should be. It could be two different things, depending on who's walking. It's just so amazing how the flesh just keeps coming out of us, man. It's evil until we die, man. It's a battle. And my whole thing is, I don't want that battle. I need Jesus's grace. I need him, man. And he's, the Bible, I threw out a tweet. We keep stats on everything, right? And stats in baseball, stats. And I shot out a tweet. Well, they kept stats 2,000 years ago too. It's called the Bible. Yeah, dude, it blew up.
Yeah.
And 90% of the people were, this is the greatest tweet in the history of tweets. Atheist guy didn't like it.
Of course he didn't, but that's okay.
No, yeah.
No,
So you know what, man?
Great.
He needs to be more. I know that he needs to be a constant opening day with Jesus mindset every day, and stop beating ourselves up, man. He died for all our sins, past, present, future. And if you could really grasp that and just get the peace, that he wants us to have.
For you, why is it important? Because that's what the motto of what Sports Spectrum is about, bringing Jesus back into the conversation. Why is it important for you to bring Jesus into the conversation?
I just feel that he set me up a ministry that I'm not even ready for. I have 50,000 Twitter followers, and 80% of them are Christian athletes because I see the verses. And so, I try to be, I don't want to be that guy that falls, because I can. And I just feel that, I want to be an example of it. Sometimes you don't feel like it, but it's like, that's, I think that too many people think that we're here for God to serve us instead of for us to serve God.
Yeah.
And trust me, I'm like, when I start praying for me and all this stuff to happen, it's not right. I mean, the good prayer is to ask God, how can you use me today? Use me today.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, instead of what he could do for us. We're not here for that. It's what we could do for him, and spreading his word and trying to be, I spoke in front of 4,000 coaches at the Anaheim Convention Center, and I prayed before I spoke. I gave that little testimony, and I had a coach email me, and he said, Spring, your speech was great, but you smoked me when you started talking about God, because I had walked away from God.
Wow.
And right there was like worth the whole thing, right?
Well, imagine if you didn't mention God in your story, right?
Well, and I called him up. I said, bro, I guarantee you God never forgot about you. I think that we think that, I believe that when you are so sincere that you accept Christ, dude, he ain't letting you go.
Yeah.
You might backslide a bit, but he's not letting you go. He's not us. He's not human. He's not going to change his mind. He knows how we felt at that certain time when we asked him his heart. I mean, both my kids are saved. Yeah. And, it's just, that's when you get the chills, when you know that your kids are going to heaven.
Yes. Steve, this has been great talking to you. Quality at bats. You've talked about it a lot. Tell us about how people can learn more about that and some of the other great things you have going on.
Oh, well, qualityatbats.com. I got my CD, my DVD, my parents' CD, my pitching CD, and my book. And if you type in coupon code springtime, it's like $57 for everything. Uh-huh. And it's awesome. And I also have a 22-minute little free the analogies of baseball and the Christian walk with me and Pete McKenzie. We were coming home from a retreat, and I just put the phone on and basically interviewed him, which is why this is so good. And get that for free, download it for free. The analogies of baseball and the Christian walk with Pete McKenzie on my website, qualityatbats.com. And then follow me on Twitter at qualityatbats and Facebook at qualityatbats, and everything's at qualityatbats. So, Jace, I appreciate you, bro. Love being on the show, man. God bless you, and thanks a lot, bro.
Yeah, Steve, thank you, man. I appreciate talking to you. Thanks for sharing your story, and we'll catch up soon. Thanks, man.
Love it. Thanks, bud.
And we do thank Steve Springer for joining us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Such a cool guy, and really liked hearing his story, his baseball journey. Lots of fun there. I'm sure he's the kind of guy that we could be sitting around the dinner table for hours and hours and just hearing these awesome stories of the life that he's lived in baseball, and just grateful that he took a few minutes to share those stories and some of those stories with us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Again, go to qualityatbats.com or go to on Twitter and follow him there at qualityatbats. That's the mental side of the game that Steve is so passionate about and believes that it really can change how baseball players and softball players are productive in the game, not just by hitting more, but by changing their mental approach and how they view the game of baseball and the game of softball. So Steve Springer at Quality at Bats on Twitter. Check him out. We thank you for joining us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast, and we thank our sponsor, Compassion International. Go to compassion.com/Sports Spectrum. Sponsor a child today for just $38 a month. We do that with a 13-year-old boy from Haiti, and we have no regrets. So we want to invite you, even challenge you, to simply make room around your dinner table to help a child who needs you. It's so little to change a child's entire trajectory. Join us at Sports Spectrum and sponsor a child with Compassion today. Compassion.com/Sports Spectrum and sponsor a child today. Thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast. Reach us on Twitter at sports_spectrum. Email me, jason@sportspectrum.com. And the one thing we'd love to harp on this podcast is to leave a review. Go to iTunes on Apple Podcasts and leave a review of this podcast. It helps get the word out, helps bring more awareness to the podcast. And that's the goal here, right? To tell people, to have people hear these stories of sports and faith and maybe encourage them or maybe pique their interest in wanting to know more about this Jesus that has meant so much to so many. So leave a review on iTunes, Apple Podcasts. And if you do, let me know that you left the review. We'd love to just thank you and send you a note of gratitude for listening to the podcast and telling others about it. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time right here at Sports Spectrum.